like when we start using AI systems, it's like adopting a baby tiger. It's very cute and exciting and everyone wants to be part of it, but it has the ability, baby tigers become big tigers, and big tigers can hurt people. And AI is the exact same way. When it's small, we don't really think about the long-term consequences. And so what I often say is like the biggest concern or myth is that this baby tiger won't grow up and hurt anyone. Like that we think it's somehow safe in its current state, when actually what you're doing is you're training something that if you're not very, very careful, it can grow up to actually have a pretty negative impact on society. But the opposite is also true, right? It can have an extremely positive impact, but you do need to build it safely and responsibly to do that.
Welcome, Noelle. Thank you for being here. Excited to jump into a conversation of AI. You are an AI expert. You speak in front of large audiences and you consult people on the topics of how to use AI, what we should do, what we shouldn't do. And everyone, they have heard of AI, but maybe not everyone have a good definition of what that actually is. So we'll start there. Give me a definition of AI, maybe AGI and ASI, so people get a little better understanding what those are.
I have an opportunity to work with a lot of different companies. My career started at Amazon Alexa about 10 years ago. So we've had an opportunity to really see the concept of artificial intelligence really bloom over the last decade. But I do like to explain to people what AI really means, because it's more than just kind of the today's buzzword or the hype cycle as we've started to see. And in my mind, it's really about user experience, is shifting away from having humans have to interact with every part of their world, from human interactions to technology interactions. Artificial intelligence allows us to delegate some of that work to machines. And at the end of the day, what that means is that these machines have to know how to make good choices. So I often say that people who are parents or caregivers or even pet owners make really good AI engineers, because they know how to help make better choices, right? One of the things that I often like to talk about is how do we ensure, in a world of artificial intelligence, how do we make sure we don't think it's just this like easy button that you press, or some big model in the sky. A lot of people, when they think about AI, they think about one holistic thing, when actually it's millions of things. Even at Alexa, there were hundreds of models that were combined together to create a unique experience. ChatGPT had 8 different models that were coming together to give us, but anyone who used ChatGPT kind of thought it was one thing, that they were talking to a single system, and it was giving a single answer. But the reality is that underneath it all, it actually is a lot of different things working together.
I see it very similarly how our body works. There are all kinds of subsystems, organs and cells and all that. They all have their own intelligence, their own function. You have an input and an output, and then that's probably how future systems of AI will basically train a very like narrow function AIs that are very predictable. There are no hallucination, no oopsies or surprises. They're all doing a very like predefined function, and then there's a whole orchestra of those types of systems working together and creating like a more advanced kind of system that acts for us.
Yeah, I think the human brain is very much like that. Like you said, as we start building AI systems, it's really important that we do actually build these purpose-built models. We're hearing a term now called agentic AI, or building agents. And these agents are meant to do this orchestration for us. But unless we've built those models first to be small, purpose-built, and extremely efficient at doing that single task, only then can we rely on it when we actually, similarly to walking or driving, a lot of us are maybe distracted when we drive, right? We're driving, but we know how to drive. It's muscle memory to us. So we do have to build these small AI systems to become the muscle memory to some of these bigger systems that we'll be building over time.
So if you had to convince someone why AI is good, what would you say?
Well, the first thing I'd say is look at how AI has helped people in some of the most important industries in the world. So healthcare and finance. Now, there's just as many AI gone wrong stories as there are AI for good stories, unfortunately. And of course, press and people like to, really think about kind of the bad part of AI. But what inspires me is how I use AI every single day. So I have a son with Down syndrome, for example. He has special needs. we've leveraged, I mean, as soon as he could talk to tech, his entire world changed. And artificial intelligence, there's many different ways to implement AI, but one of them is natural language, being able to let an AI system understand how humans talk. And what that now allows us to do is not use a phone or a keyboard or a mouse or a laptop. We can just use our voice and do the same exact things as someone with a computer can do. And today that's accelerated all the way to the point where someone who maybe doesn't have the dexterity to type on a computer, but they can build the same, if not better software just by using their voice. So I think that's part of the future, right? And part of what we can get excited about is that the boundaries and the barriers to entry to build incredible things, whether on the creative side or even on the science side, those barriers are reduced significantly in a world where we can just talk to our technology.
And what would you say is one of the biggest misconceptions that needs to be reframed, that people get it wrong around AI?
There's a lot of misconceptions, I think. One of the ones that I hear all the time, so I speak on stages quite a bit all over the world, lots of executives, and many times they will make a presumption that public AI is safe. That, I'll ask them, are you using AI and do you think you're using it safely? And they'll be like, yeah, we use ChatGPT. And I think their presumption is that using ChatGPT for business is a safe environment. And it's getting very good. But the whole idea of an AI system is to appear very good. But without these guardrails, just like cybersecurity, like everything seems fine until all of a sudden it's not fine. And so AI systems are similar in that way, that you have to really put in guardrails. I have an analogy that I use all the time around baby tigers. Like when we start using AI systems, it's like adopting a baby tiger. It's very cute and exciting and everyone wants to be part of it, but it has the ability, baby tigers become big tigers and big tigers can hurt people. And AI is the exact same way. When it's small, we don't really think about the long-term consequences. And so what I often say is like the biggest concern or myth is that this baby tiger won't grow up and hurt anyone. Like that we think it's somehow safe in its current state, when actually what you're doing is you're training something that if you're not very, very careful, it can grow up to actually have a pretty negative impact on society. But the opposite is also true, right? It can have an extremely positive impact, but you do need to build it safely and responsibly to do that.
What would you say is a desirable human future? How would you define what is a desirable human future?
So for me personally, it allows me to do what I love to do, right? And so there's lots of different frameworks for this. We have personality tests that go back decades that say like, who are you? And if you align to that awareness of who you are, you'll be happier. And what I think the age of AI is starting to reveal is that we can actually intentionally delegate AI to do the things that are not in alignment with those things we love to do. I think an immediate challenge I'm running into with executives is that they want to use AI to do everything, but they don't realize that the value of having humans do certain types of tasks is that there's nothing like a human who's doing something on purpose, meaning in alignment with their purpose. Like we work harder, we're more ingenuitive, we try and find more creative ways of solving a problem. So there's an accelerator that comes with artificial intelligence when we take away kind of that mundane task, especially when I as the human choose what I delegate to. It makes me a leader. So now I don't have to actually have direct reports in a company. I can actually just be leading AI systems and get that same benefit of leadership.
Is there like a day of a life, let's say your day of ideal case scenario future for yourself? What would that look like?
A day in the life for me, so I'm living it kind of right now. So right now I have an opportunity. I mean, granted, I'm a builder. So I believe everyone should become a builder. Everyone should learn. Because the beauty of it, of course, is that you don't actually have to know how to code to be a builder anymore. You just need to have clarity of thought and understand what you want. And now these AI systems can provide it to you. So I think I build when I wake up and I run into a situation, the first thing I do is look for an AI system and how I might be able to create an AI system that will help me. In the past, as a technologist, when I would run into a problem, if I recognized that problem, I would immediately write a script for it, or I would immediately create some automation so that the next time I ran into that problem, I wouldn't have to rethink that. Yes. But today, I can actually build an entire AI system to do that same thing. Rather than a script that I have to run, it's now an entire system that I just have to say, hey, remember when it was Taco Tuesday last week and I had to order all this stuff?
Yeah.
Just do that again. Do whatever it is that took a bunch of time from me as a human, keeping me from doing what I love to do all of that for me. But of course, in order for a system and really even for a human to do those types of tasks, we have to train it. And so that, I think, my day in the life is training machines to do things so that my next day, next week, next month, and next year become less and less of the things that I spent really wasted time putting together today.
So I see AI and technology, like tools that we build, are better at basically replacing humans at a productive task. Like anything that we consider productive, we find ways how to train AI to do those things. And it feels like we're heading into the future where there will be no more productive things for humans to do. What would that look like?
Well, I think it depends on how you define productivity. So this is actually an incredibly important point. Like companies have to really reinvent what productivity looks for their organization. Productivity is not like how many meetings do you have on your schedule, even how many lines of code do you deploy. Now where we have AI that can write code for us, that can build images for us, it's going to become a different metric of success. So, for example, I work a lot in contact centers. It's a big cost center for organizations. And right now, their metric for measuring success is how long do they spend on phone calls. Yeah. And actually, they want to increase like how many problems they solve and decrease the amount of time it takes, which, to your point, would actually eliminate humans, because humans are the ones that take a long time, have a long conversation. But what happens when I reinvent what customer service looks like? And I actually say, no, now your job is to not do those mundane tasks that answer the questions. Yeah. Your job is to create a relationship with your customers so that they buy more stuff, that they trust you, I think we're moving into a world where people don't just randomly go on a website and buy something. They're going to look at, who are you? What do you think about? What are your values? And so having a workforce that embodies those values, I think is going to be really critical moving forward. So productivity, I think, will change. Like our definition of productivity will change. And more importantly, today, companies need to think about what does productivity even look like in the future when we're not needing them. It's just like students even, right? Yeah. What does student success look like in a world where they could just ask ChatGPT to write a report for them?
For sure.
Well, it's not going to be writing a report. It's not going to be taking a test. It's going to be human discourse. It's going to be debate and logic and argumentation. Like, how do you learn to communicate? I think those are going to be the skills that become more important.
The way I see it, maybe productivity concept, yes, it will change a bit, but maybe we won't value it as much, and we say, yeah, we know what productivity is, but we're not optimizing for productivity per se.
Yeah, maybe it won't be a metric that we measure. Like right now, I think it's probably part of organizations like core values. Yeah. Like we want to make sure we're as productive as possible. Right. Where in a world where that's commoditized, exactly. Now we have to really define like who are we going to be as a company if productivity is not how we define our success.
What are we optimizing for?
Yeah.
And okay, so maybe we can go there. What would we then optimize for?
Yeah, so I think, this is coming from my experience, of course, but I think there's a huge opportunity in optimizing for human connection. Right? Like the companies I work with now, and granted, I'm maybe a further ahead than most people, but I'm looking at companies and the first thing I do is look at their executive team, right? What do you think? What do you do? What are your core values? The next thing I look at is like what they've published about themselves. In a world now where I can leverage an AI system to go do that research on my behalf, I can find out a lot more about the essence of who a company is in much less time. And as people uncover that, they're going to be looking at who you are, not what you do. And in a world where lots of us can do the same exact thing, there's lots of artists, there's lots of musicians. I, as a consumer, I want the ability to ask a question and have a system go, oh, these are companies that align with that, or these are musicians that align with what you think. Netflix is doing it for us now, right? Yeah. Here are shows that we think you would like. So imagine that at scale across everything we consume. So I think that means that companies need to think more about what happens in a world where someone can just ask for characteristics of a company. How do we show up? Most people right now, if you searched for characteristics of a company, we wouldn't find what we need. But in a generative world, that's what companies are going to have to do. Like even individuals and creators, like we all have to redefine how the world discovers us. And it's going to be much more human, I think, than
Very
machine.
interesting. As you were describing it, what I imagine, so we all, I believe, have a particular like dharma, purpose of why we're here. Maybe it is expressed in the way it expressed changes over time, but I think there's still a core like purpose why we're here, and maybe there will be a system that knows about everyone's or like helps you to identify what your core purpose is, and it's kind of like a meet meetup or matches people basically.
Oh yeah, exactly. Well, and one thing that's interesting that people could do right now, right now, if you've been leveraging ChatGPT, it's storing memories about you, right? And so
exactly.
you could go into that system right now and it won't be accurate because you weren't intentional about it, but you could ask it, who do you think I am? Based on all the questions I've asked you and what I've asked you to help me with, who do you think I am? And its answer is very revealing. Sometimes we agree with it, just like these personality tests. Sometimes we're like, oh, that's a pretty good assessment. But sometimes we're like, what about what I'm doing says that about me?
Yes.
And it's very revealing because they become mirrors, right? These systems.
Sure.
And for the most part, they're like this now, right? We say, oh, that model has an error in it. But it really, it's an error because we don't like what it says. But it's not coming from nothing. A hallucination is not deriving something from nothing.
Right.
It's inaccurately representing what it's interpreted from past history, which is exactly what will happen in the future. We'll be able to ask a system like, who are we? Who are we as a company? And its interpretation will be based on our past history.
Yeah.
Now, that doesn't mean we have to stick with it. It is technically an error if we want to be a different person.
Right.
But that means we need to now do different things
and
train the model on the different things that we're doing.
Do you think a world of there are two extremes, full privacy or full transparency? Where are you on that spectrum in terms of like what would be a better version of the future? Is it leaning more into we're more transparent, we're revealing more about ourselves out into the public, into the world, or we are more private and we don't reveal much information? Because there are two camps of people.
Yes, absolutely. And that's a difficult one because in my mind, it depends, right? There's things that are happening like in the Department of Homeland Security around child trafficking that I don't want people to know that that's happening, because then the people that are doing bad things it's just like cyber, right? The more you reveal about the way you operate, the more vulnerable you are to people using that information against you. So there is some level but I do believe in some level of transparency, like model cards, for example, was recently released in, 2 years ago in AI, where we were seeing all these black box systems that were very valuable, but people were like, well, how'd you come up with that decision? What variables did you use in a large language model? How do we even know what they tuned? And if it's a trillion parameter model, what do we even know about what they focused on or cared about? And so companies, even like OpenAI, which some would say is the least open AI, but they've also, had to come to the realization that some transparency is necessary. So I think we'll also start to see regulation come out that says you have to tell us how these systems are built, what data they were used, what data you use. You don't have to provide the bits and bytes, but you do have to provide some transparency. And I think in a world, like I said, as we move towards more technical solutions, people are going to hunger for not just human connection, but actually being able to trust a system. And the only way to gain trust is through transparency and explainability. So I don't think we're going to be able to avoid it. But at the same time, I'll tell you a little bit about Alexa, right? Alexa started 10 years ago. In the beginning, everyone, 100% of the people that bought Alexa opted into giving the utterances to Amazon to make it a better product because it was cool and it was new. Now, 35% of people who own Alexas have unplugged them and put them in a closet because they're worried about, wait, Alexa's always listening, and they don't have full transparency on how that information's being used. I always tell people, the phone is way worse than an Alexa device, but nobody's going to put their phone in a closet. But you have an average of 75 apps. Each one has different privacy policies. Most of us don't, all of us don't read those privacy policies. And so there's a tendency, I think, to think it'd be good to be more private. But the reality is that we're all extremely exposed just by using the technology that we're leveraging.
Mm-hmm. I see the trend of, so there were these big data companies like Googles and Facebooks of the world, they would collect enormous amount of data about ourselves, and then they would benefit from that type of data. Ourselves, we wouldn't necessarily benefit greatly from that. But now we live in an age where we are capable, or there are ways for us to start collecting information about ourselves, and then with the AI being able to get insights into what's relevant for us, which is a new thing. This is like a new health data, or I've been really benefiting from putting all of my journal notes into AI, and kind of like what you said, AI is learning about you. I've started it even before they've included the memory function. I would take all of my notes for the last few years, and I would put it all in and start asking questions. Who am I? What's important? Over time, all of my notes are dated, so you can, run some kind of analysis over time, what has been happening, any patterns over time. There's so much insight that you can gather about yourself that you weren't able before.
Yeah, I think it's really exciting because you also can do that with very little technical experience, right? So somebody who just knows how to take pictures of their notebooks. I mean, I even have a podcast called Noelle's Notebook, because I have hundreds of these moleskin notebooks just filled with ideas that I had at the time that I had them. Some of them I implemented, but most of them I never did, right? I just closed the book, put it in my bookshelf. But now I can go back and take pictures of all of those pages. And now with new AI systems, OCR, it can analyze my handwriting, and even if it's only 75% accurate, I have hundreds of these pages, thousands. And so now I can import that in, and all I have to do is take a picture and ask a question. And that is extremely liberating, I think, for people. I have an Aura ring, right? So I'm constantly gathering, and an Apple Watch. I mean, technically, I think when I bought the ring, I was going to get rid of the watch, but that never happened. So I have both of these. Collecting data about how I operate. Aura just recently released this thing called resilience. So it's a metric that measures multiple different things about your body, but combines them into how resilient are you to stress? What are your cortisol levels? And these things are things I never had access to before, to your point, right? We now have the ability, and most importantly, we have the ability to take all of this data and feed it into a large language model and just ask questions of it. We don't have to be technical. We don't have to be a data scientist. We don't have to know how to write code. We can but what we do have to do, which is part of kind of who we need to evolve to be, we do have to know how to ask a good question. We do need to know how to identify clarity of thought around what we're trying to accomplish. And that's not really a popular skill these days.
Totally. Very useful one. But do you think in the future, maybe even that won't be even necessary? AI will be able to almost read your mind, read what the intention, the deep intention that you might not be able to articulate it with your fuzzy, ability to communicate, but AI will be he means exactly that. Yeah.
Yes. Well, here's the challenge. So Meta did a study about 5 years ago on replace text, when it automatically pops up text, predictive text.
Yeah.
Right? So all of us have gotten used to predictive text. It's now in Google, it's on our iPhone, it's everywhere, but Meta started it in Google, in Gmail. And so inside Gmail, we get this predictive text. They tested a 6-month test. It was just a social experiment. And they gave people predictive text, and then they took it away. And what they found out, their hypothesis was, do people actually change the way they think based on what a model predicts? And their hypothesis was confirmed that over 6 months, as we started getting surfaced, say fantastic or brilliant, or, answer your email this way, or close your email this way, start your email this way, complete your sentences this way. When the model was removed, those humans ended up answering more like the model than they did like their original self 6 months prior. So taking that hypothesis to today, we now have models suggesting things to us that we didn't actually think about, which is not bad, because maybe it's something we want to think about. But what if it isn't? And what if we are, as we know from social media over the last 15 years, we're extremely impressionable as humans. So, and none of this is regulated. It's run by CEOs that are not elected. They're just they either create a company and it grows, or a board of director identifies them. I mean, we're in a situation where this technology that we're using to suggest things to ourselves about who we may want to be, I don't know, that ethically, I'm not sure even if I could use a system to tell me that, I want to make sure we've got some pretty significant, for the rest of the world. I mean, you and I are pretty technical, like we know this technology, we understand that it's not real, but I mean, just recently, Character AI, right, had a child, a 17-year-old commit suicide because of a relationship it had with a bot, where they completely, like, they disclosed everything. They said, this is not real. Like, they did all the right things ethically, but are they still responsible if somebody goes too far? And that's kind of what the balance that we're going to have to play over the next 5 to 10 years is, how do we stop people from overindulging and over-relying on this technology to define them? And I think people are very susceptible to that easy answer, as opposed to doing the real work, which is you did the journaling first, like, you know, and then you entered it. Or now you're right. Models, I do think, are going to be able to predict what you would even journal. But how valuable is that to someone who's actually seeking self-realization?
Right. Wow. Yeah. So many thoughts related to what you were just saying. Do you think we're getting to the point where our ability as humans are diminishing? Yes, we can do a lot more with the tools that we have, but right. So we're becoming atrophied in other functions. Like, I mean, the most common example, people say you don't remember phone numbers, but who really needs the phone numbers? But you can't really survive, let's say, in the forest by yourself, just because we're too reliant on, we're like kind of useless without our technology.
Yes. It's interesting. I have some agreement to that, because I do every so often, maybe once a month, kind of go off the grid, if you will, just to practice. Like, for example, now I don't use Google Maps to get anywhere anymore. Like, I look at it maybe ahead of time, as I used to, right? We used to get a map and then be like, okay, I think I know where I'm going. And then I try to use my own brain to get myself there. But absolutely, it's very easy to kind of, use this as a bit of a crutch.
Yes.
And then when you don't have that crutch, you realize your legs aren't strong enough to stand on your own. So I do think that there is a danger of that, especially one of the societal things that I'm noticing is we're in a world right now. I've heard the term silver tsunami, which represents all these people, maybe you and me in the early days, but all these people in their 60s, 70s, turning gray. They're all retiring and leaving the workforce. And they've spent 20 years the old-fashioned way learning the craft of whatever it is that they do. Now we have young people entering the workforce, and they're entering in a time where we're using AI to do all those things that we would have used to cut our teeth and get our skill set. So now it's almost like a perfect storm that's brewing here, where we've got people that know how to do this because they learned the old-fashioned way. We've got young people who will never learn that way because they now have an AI system. But I don't know that we have companies or people that have the right leadership skills to lead people who don't have those skills. Like, people are less ambitious. They don't even know what, they don't plan for the year. New Year's resolutions are at an all-time low. Like, there's all this interest, these signals that I think are very challenging in this kind of environment, because what happens when we don't get those skills? Like, the beginning of every career is now very different. Internship, what are you going to do that I couldn't just get an AI model to do? Why would I even do that? How are we going to get someone to become nothing to a senior manager or to a VP? Like, how are VPs going to be built?
For sure.
It's going to be a very interesting...
What is your, I know that you're very optimistic in nature. Yeah. How would you solve, that trend? Like, what do we need to do now to make sure we end up in a desirable kind of future?
Well, I actually think it really is symbolic of what we've done over the last few years, maybe last 10 years, is move more into this gig economy, right? That as individuals, we are going to, and in a world where I can automate things that I don't do well, I as an individual can become much more valuable. I can hone in on the skills I want to learn and use, and I can become an expert in that. I can develop that completely separate from a company and then become valuable to a company because of my unique experience. One thing that's important about artificial intelligence and building models, especially large language models, is that they are hinged on inclusive input prior to production, right? There's an entire concept called AI red teaming of similar to cybersecurity, but very different in the AI world, where we need people to just test a model to make sure it doesn't do anything inappropriate. Yeah. But we don't need people who built the model to do that. We need completely divergent thinkers. We need artists and musicians. We need people who were raised poor, people who went to university. Like, we need all of these different perspectives, because the models serve lots of different people.
Right.
And so now companies are going to be looking for these fragmented roles to say, hey, can you come and help me train this model? Can you come and help me teach this model? In a world where we're building thousands of agents, thousands of models in a company, who's going to actually make sure that those models are accurate and fair and, secure? I think this is where a lot of people are going to move into this gig economy, and companies are going to move away from hiring people for 20 years. They've already done that. But even hiring people for 3 years as employees, and actually just say, hey, why don't you come in and do this for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 6 months, a year? I think that's probably going to, and I think it's better, because then we get to, I find a younger, earlier in career generation, they grow tired and bored very quickly in a world where we're just a cog in a machine. So now those cogs can actually be cogs. They can be AI systems, but you're going to need humans that validate them, that train them, and that ultimately make them safer.
Do you see, so let's say, as far as you can see in the future, there will still be need for companies in which humans play a role? Because I do definitely see companies in which AI just functions, the whole stack is filled with AI agents.
Yeah.
But what about humans? What would humans do? Is it the intention, the visions function, or what else would humans do in those types of companies?
Yes, I know a lot of people are talking today about like AGI and having these systems that can fully automate an entire role, for example, or multiple roles, right? It could be a doctor and a nurse and a teacher. What I found in practice is that's whether the tech exists to do that or not, human adoption is very different. We saw that with Google Lens, right? Or Google Glass. Like, back in the day, great tech, but everyone was like, yeah, no, I'm never going to do that. And now we're seeing spatial computing get a whole new era, just like AI did. And so we're seeing Apple Vision Pros and all of these types of things come out. So I do think it's a bit of, companies will always need humans, because at the end of the day, I don't want to buy from a machine. I don't want to interact with a machine. I think humans will crave human interaction. Whether you use AI to augment your ability to deliver that product or service successfully, I think that will, depend on how interested you are in leveraging. But I definitely think AI will be part of the workforce. But I don't see AI coming up with new ideas. I mean, just think of an average entrepreneur. Our job is to look at a problem and be like, I want to solve that problem. AI, you have to tell it what problem to look at, and then even give it guidance on how to solve that problem. Otherwise, let's say you don't do that and you just say, AI, look at this and tell me what problems to fix.
Right.
Without the guardrails of humanity, it might not fix the right things. And you don't, if you didn't build it yourself, you don't even know what it's prioritized to look at. So there's always got to be this human lens on what do we care about, what do we want to go after, and how are we going to measure success? AI doesn't do that work. And then if you think about a company, that's like the executive board's job, right? So you have an executive board, maybe it's the CEO and CTO in a small company. But then eventually that CEO and CTO, they hold this big vision, but that's going to turn into 15, 20 products. Right. Now you need 2 to 3 people, maybe, again, it depends on scale, but 2 to 3 people now that own the robots that do that work. But there has to be, because again, in my experience with AI is not great at understanding the nuances of humanity. Even if I train it, it still doesn't get it because it's not human. Yeah. It doesn't understand fairness because it doesn't know who to be fair to. And we know this. Fairness is very subjective. Yeah. I was just on jury duty and I was like, I see why humans do this work. Because it's very much like they needed a jury of 12 of us for a reason, because we all brought very different perspectives to the table. And so I think that's going to be part of the future, that we have to really think about how are we going to, like, humans are required to provide this level of guarding.
And you think maybe the reason why AI is not capable of making those types of human decisions is because we haven't inputted enough variables for it to consider when it's, even when, what example did you give with human, all of the human skills that AI is not yet able to account for.
Right.
But I do see a future in which it can account for a lot of additional things that affect our decision consciously or subconsciously. And at that point, and I wanted to bring this quote or like this statement that I read. Elon Musk just put it out on Twitter.
Yes.
That he said, like, intelligence should be measured in how well you can predict the future. And so if you can predict human behavior, and you design this very intelligent system, then you can argue that you don't need humans to make those human decisions.
You don't need them maybe to make the decisions, but you do need them to define the decision framework.
Yeah.
And in an organization that's growing and scaling, those decisions will constantly evolve. Your customer base will evolve. Again, you could build a system, but someone needs to build the system. Like these AIs they cannot operate by themselves. They can operate by themselves in certain use cases. So even my robot who vacuums my floor at home, like, it was not great when it started. It's a little better now, but every so often I have to be like, hey, like, you missed the corner again, right? Like, and I have to train it on realizing that it's not great. And this is true over time. There's a couple different machine learning things that happen. One is, it's called catastrophic forgetting. So over time, a machine learning model, just like the human brain, when focused on one task, it starts to kind of forget other tasks. It doesn't become as good because it's not using those muscles, right? So atrophied in machines is just as real. So machines get less good at things that it's not focused on and not practicing. Same is true. So when you build a model, again, humans will be required, no matter how sophisticated they get. The problems they solve might get more sophisticated. But I do think that, like, we're moving into a world where we become orchestrators. You mentioned that word earlier, right? We become orchestrators. I don't think that orchestration, even if a model creates it, that we would, as humanity, be willing to be like, yeah, I'm sure it's fine.
Yeah.
I mean, we'll see over time these challenges we have with AI and AI gone wrong. They will get worse and worse and worse as the scale of what we're asking AI to do expands. And it will show us. I mean, it's showing us already in small use cases, but people sometimes don't take heed when it's small. When they're like, oh, that's too bad that judge, hammered this lawyer for submitting a false brief. That's not me. But as we see this happen, it's just like data breaches, right? Data breaches happen in companies all day long.
Yeah.
But it's only when it happens to AT&T or it happens to Target or it happens to our bank that we're like, oh, this is real. We need to be worried about this. And unfortunately, I don't think we realize the impact that humans have on building these systems until those systems start making really grave mistakes. I wish we would learn ahead, but unfortunately, history has shown us that we actually don't learn predictively. We learn post trauma. And that's unfortunately part of humanity. But I do think we have to be involved the entire time because these systems will evolve and we need to monitor those evolutions.
For those who are concerned about, okay, AI will replace all of the jobs, I have my own opinion or like my own vision of the future. And it's the future in which technology becomes this background. In fact, I think I coined this phrase is the most advanced technology is the one that's least noticeable. And so I see the future in which we are very technologically sophisticated, but from outside, if we just go forward in time and peek into what that looks like, it looks a fairly primitive way of living where we don't have like gadgets and tools that we don't understand. We're just seeing us being more integrated with nature and giving our bodies are much better designed for the natural things, being in nature and touching and hugging each other and looking each other's into our eyes. And that's kind of the future I think we're getting into. I hope that that's at least a branch of the future. There certainly will be simultaneously different versions as we have now. There are neighborhoods where there's a lot of crime, and then there are also neighborhoods where it's peaceful and it's beautiful. And I hope that we have a bigger branch where we live in more unity and integrated more in nature and being more humans, expressing our humanness.
Yeah, I love that. I think one of the things that comes to mind when you say that is equity, right? Part of that, and there's a reason why certain areas are crime filled and certain areas aren't. And many times it comes down to financial stability, right? And so I think that's the same is true as we move into the age of AI, that we are going to see this gap widen between the haves and the have-nots. And that in order for us to see the world that you are envisioning, like that gap has to close. Because otherwise, and we're in a world where all you have to do is talk to the tech, and the tech is actually free in most cases. But there are entire parts of the United States, and we're pretty affluent as a country, the entire parts of the United States that are not leveraging this technology. Yeah. There are kids in school that are banned from using this technology. And that instantly makes them at a disadvantage to then other organizations, right, that might be building, these types of technologies. So that's my biggest concern, is that it's kind of haves versus have-nots, that digital divide. I think that will turn into a real challenge for us in achieving this utopian perspective. Because like you said, I am optimistic. So I do really see a world where this technology evolves everyone. Yeah. But not if we're not really intentional about bringing everyone along the way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so maybe one kind of last question, or a few last questions around what do we now need to do to make sure that we build systems in AI, even for those who are not deeply in technology? What would you recommend we do to make sure we end up in the more desirable place?
I'm always a believer in being a builder, right? Get your fingers on a keyboard and just start asking questions. I think that's the first thing I encourage people to do, is actually just use the technology. I do think it's important for people to understand, the guardrails that they should put on that usage, right? That they don't use it necessarily to do the most important things in their life, manage their finances or give them tax advice. But I do think that there's plenty of opportunity to just increase the conversational rate you have with technology. Now, at Alexa, for example, we were trying to encourage people to use Alexa every day. That was our goal. Like, our mantra was everyday use. And what we found is that people who used Alexa every day were much more likely to do other things with Amazon, not just technology-wise, but actually all things. They would buy more things. They would come to Amazon's website more often, just by increasing their level of engagement. And I think that's true across the board. How do you increase your level of engagement with technology? Today, it's easier than ever. You don't have to go take a coding boot camp. You don't have to become a data scientist or take a math class. Like, you just have to download an app and start talking to it. And today, those technologies are embedded right in tools you're using every day, from your browser, like Google, Gemini, to Copilot in Microsoft. It's inside of your word processing tools. Be willing to use it. And again, you don't have to use what it generates for you. Yeah. But it's important to get that conversation started. And then along those same lines, I think it's really important to actually understand the ethical implications. Yeah. So there's lots of things you can do, but one of the things, the benefit of using a technology is you'll immediately start to see, well, that's weird. Why did you say that? Your ethics will be kind of ingrained, and the foundation will be built based on your use. Yeah. So they kind of go together. Learn a little bit about what it means to build responsible systems, but at the same time, be a builder. Get in there and build a system that you can use every day, just like you did with your journaling, right? Like, find a use case and just see how you might use it to make your own life better.
Yeah. The advice that I often give to myself and to others as well is to have a lot more conscious intent every time we touch any piece of technology or media. Even like us creating a podcast like that, there's a lot of intention that goes into what ideas do we want to broadcast out there? How do we want, because there is an effect, like technology and media is a leverage through which we affect the world, and the leverage is becoming stronger and stronger. Now we have these powerful tools that even presidents of the countries weren't able to have access to before. And so now everyone is having this powerful tool to manifest things into the world. And we have, with great power comes great responsibility. And so conscious intent is really what should be on people's minds every time they, scroll on social media or create a content, or they interact with AI system. Yeah. So elevating your awareness and consciousness, I think, is the important work that we all need to be doing.
Yes, I actually have a set of principles that I created called the 7 Virtues of Mindful Leaders. And it was built specifically because the leaders that were running these AI teams, they weren't being intentional at all. Like it was just another software project where, I, and of course, Jeff Bezos, when I was at Amazon, was very clear about like, this will be everywhere. Alexa will be everywhere. So even though right now it's with 60 people in a beta test, it's going to be everywhere. So think like it's everywhere. And I think that's a big part of it is how do you shift to the way you think to know that what you're doing now will have a ripple effect, a butterfly effect, if you will. And if you're more intentional to say, oh, how does me talking to this system or how does me interacting with this product, how does that change how I think? It goes to some of the things we talked about, right? How do we make sure that we're not inadvertently becoming a victim of circumstance with a system that we're talking to, and instead that we are the one driving that communication and even training the model to make better choices.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. I think this is a great way for us to wrap up the conversation. Maybe any last thoughts or point people to any resources, any last?
Yeah, so similarly, of course, I'm a builder. I like to help other people become builders. As a matter of fact, right now I'm wearing my builder shirt. We're going to be doing a bot builder workshop. I have a community called the I Love AI community. It's free. Again, my attempt at closing that digital divide to get everyone to have a baseline understanding of what it means to build responsibly, what it means to adopt a baby tiger and watch it grow up. But most importantly, get your fingers on a keyboard and have some fun with people who are just as excited about the world as you are.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Thanks for having me. Yeah. It was amazing.
Amazing. And for anyone who's still around, I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I'll see you on the next one. All right. Take care.